Captain Sarah Rodriguez stood in the recruitment center on Mars, watching the chaos with satisfaction. The line of volunteers stretched out the door and around 3 city blocks. Men and women of every age and background waited in the red dust, eager to sign their names. "Next," she called out. A massive man stepped forward. He had scars covering his arms and a prosthetic leg that clicked against the metal floor. "Marcus Thompson, ice miner from Europa. I want in." Sarah looked him over. "Says here you survived 3 days in vacuum with a torn suit." "How?" Marcus grinned. "Stuffed the hole with my own frozen blood. Kept refreezing it every time it melted. Lost a leg to frostbite, but I lived. You're in. Report to Docking Bay 7. Next." A young woman approached, barely 20 years old. "Lisa Park, I'm a teacher." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "This is a military operation." "I teach chemistry," Lisa said. "Specifically, I teach kids how to make explosives from household items. It's part of the colony survival program. I can turn anything into a bomb. Bay 7, next." This continued for hours. Every human who came forward had a story. The asteroid miners who worked in conditions that would kill most aliens in seconds. The colonists from high-gravity worlds who could bench press a small vehicle. Veterans who had been forced into retirement when humanity was quarantined. Even elderly citizens who refused to let age stop them from fighting. Meanwhile, in Earth's shipyard, something miraculous was happening. Humanity was converting everything that could fly into a weapon. Cargo haulers were fitted with ram prows. Mining ships had their drilling lasers overcharged into weapons. Even luxury cruise ships were being armored and armed. Chief Engineer David Kim worked without sleep for 30 hours straight, supervising the conversion of an agricultural transport into a warship. "Weld those plates here," he shouted to his team. "I don't care if it's ugly. Ugly ships kill just as good as pretty ones." His assistant, a young man named Tom, looked uncertain. "Sir, these modifications violate about 50 safety protocols." David laughed. "Safety protocols? Boy, we're about to fly these death traps into a swarm of galaxy-eating monsters. Safety went out the window the moment we answered that distress call. The Galactic Council sent observers to monitor humanity's preparation. What they saw terrified them more than the swarm itself. Humans weren't just preparing for war. They were celebrating it. In the bars of Earth, soldiers sang ancient war songs. Children played games called Kill the Swarm in the streets. Television broadcasts showed retired generals explaining tactics with disturbing enthusiasm. The stock market surged as weapon manufacturers worked around the clock. Observer Kelleth, a small gray being from a peaceful world, watched a group of human Marines preparing their equipment. They were laughing as they sharpened knives, actual bladed weapons, and compared scars. "Excuse me?" Kelleth said nervously. "Aren't you afraid?" A Marine named Jackson turned to him. She had a scar running from her eye to her chin and arms thick with muscle. "Afraid? We've been cooped up for 40 years. Do you know how boring peace is? This is the most excitement we've had in decades." "But you could die," Kelleth insisted. Jackson shrugged. "Humans have a saying, everybody dies. Not everybody truly lives. Besides, dying while killing space monsters, that's a good death. That's a death worth having." Admiral Chen reviewed the volunteer roster with a mixture of pride and concern. In just 2 days, 30 million humans had volunteered. They couldn't take them all, but the enthusiasm was overwhelming. She turned to her aide. "What's the status on the special weapons?" "The Mars Forge has produced 10,000 kinetic rounds. Each one is a solid tungsten rod that can accelerate to 20% light speed. The Jupiter stations have prepared 500 nuclear mines. And, sir, the Canadians have offered something they call Project Maple Fury. I don't know what it is, but they say it's been waiting 50 years for a real test." Chen nodded. "And the volunteers? We've selected 5 million for combat roles. Another 2 million for support. The rest are on reserve," the aide paused. "Sir, some of these volunteers, their applications are concerning." "How so?" "Well, there's a group of Australian colonists who want to board swarm ships with just knives and explosives. They call it space crocodile wrestling. There's a Russian battalion that wants to use a tactic called nuclear chicken, flying straight at enemies and seeing who turns away first. And the Americans have proposed something called Operation Hold My Beer, which seems to involve ramming the biggest swarm ship they can find with a vessel full of antimatter." Chen actually smiled. "Approve them all, sir. The galaxy thinks we're insane. Let's not disappoint them." The alien observers sent increasingly panicked reports back to the council. Humans weren't following any conventional military doctrine. They were turning warfare into something between science and art, with a heavy dose of madness. They watched humans paint faces on their ships' hulls, snarling teeth and angry eyes. They saw soldiers decorating their armor with bones and skulls, not from enemies but from Earth predators they had killed for sport. Most disturbing of all, they witnessed humans volunteering for suicide missions with enthusiasm. "I don't understand," observer Caleth reported to the council. "They're treating this like a festival. They have musicians composing war songs. Artists are painting battle scenes that haven't happened yet. Their news channels are rating which ships have the best chance of going out in a blaze of glory." Back on Earth, Sarah Rodriguez addressed her assembled crew. Her ship, the Hellhound, was a former cargo hauler now bristling with weapons. Her crew of 300 included military veterans, civilian volunteers, and even a few criminals who had been offered pardons in exchange for service. "Listen up," she said. "The galaxy thinks we're monsters. They locked us away because we scared them. Now they need monsters, so that's what we'll be. We're going to hit that swarm with everything we have. Kinetics, nukes, ramming attacks if necessary. Some of us won't come back, but those that do will have stories worth telling." A volunteer raised his hand. "Captain, what if the swarm adapts to our weapons too?" Sarah's grin was feral. "Then we'll improvise. Humans have been killing things bigger and stronger than us for millions of years. We didn't become the dominant species on a death world by giving up when things got tough." The human fleet began to assemble at the edge of the solar system. It was a sight that defied military convention. Sleek warships flew alongside converted cargo vessels. Mining ships with drill heads replaced by ram spikes lined up next to luxury yachts covered in armor plating. Every vessel was unique, every modification slightly insane. The flagship, Earth's Vengeance, was a kilometer-long dreadnought that had been hidden in the asteroid belt for 30 years. Its main gun could fire projectiles that hit with the force of atomic bombs. Its hull was decorated with a painting of Earth itself, surrounded by the corpses of humanity's enemies. Admiral Chen stood on its bridge, looking at the assembled fleet. 4,000 ships, each one crewed by humans who had volunteered to fight an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. The galaxy called us Deathworlders. They said we were too dangerous, too violent, too unpredictable. They were right. But now they need those exact qualities. So let's show them what Deathworlders can do. Set course for the outer rim. Maximum burn." The engines of 4,000 ships roared to life. The human fleet surged forward, accelerating to speeds that would crush most alien species. Inside each ship, humans sang, laughed, and prepared for battle with disturbing enthusiasm. The galaxy watched in awe and terror as humanity mobilized. They had asked for help. What they got was an unleashed force of nature. Millions of years of evolution on a hostile world compressed into a military force unlike anything the universe had ever seen. The emergency lights bathed the Galactic Council chamber in deep red. 500 representatives from different worlds sat in silence as Ambassador Veleth walked to the center platform. His forearms shook slightly. His blue skin had turned pale gray with fear. "The outer rim is gone," Veleth said. His voice echoed in the massive dome. 3 star systems, 12 billion lives. The Devourer swarm consumed them all in 6 days. The silence broke. Representatives shouted questions and demands. Some cried out in their native languages. Others simply sat frozen in shock. The swarm had been a distant threat for so long that many thought it was just a legend. Now it was real, and it was coming for them. Council leader Thymus raised her crystalline appendage for silence. "Show them the footage, Ambassador." The holographic display came to life above their heads. It showed the Kepler Defense Fleet, 200 of the galaxy's finest warships firing their energy beams at the approaching swarm. The beams hit the writhing mass of biomechanical creatures. But instead of destroying them, the energy made them grow stronger. The swarm adapted, absorbed, and multiplied. Within minutes, the proud fleet was torn apart. Ships crumbled like paper as millions of swarm units devoured their hulls. "Our weapons are useless," Veleth continued. "The swarm learns from every attack. Energy weapons make it stronger. Plasma feeds its growth. Even our antimatter bombs just make it spread faster. At its current speed, it will reach the core worlds in 30 days. A representative from the Altair Collective stood up. "What about evacuation? Where would 5 trillion beings go?" Thymus asked. "Every habitable world in our reach will be consumed. There is nowhere to run. The chamber fell silent again. After 800 years of peace, the Galactic Council faced extinction. Their advanced technology, their sophisticated weapons, their united fleets, none of it mattered against an enemy that ate energy itself. Velath's translator buzzed. He touched his throat and spoke again. There is one option, but the Council banned it 40 years ago. Everyone knew what he meant before he said it. The humans. The reaction was immediate and violent. Representatives jumped from their seats. Some hissed or growled in their species' way of showing disgust. Others began arguing loudly. Absolutely not, shouted the Zenith representative. Humans are insane. They set off nuclear weapons on their own planet just to see what would happen. They fight wars for entertainment. Their children play with projectile weapons. They were quarantined for good reason, added another voice. They come from a Class 12 death world. Do you understand what that means? Their planet has hurricanes that can destroy cities, earthquakes that reshape continents. They have creatures called sharks that hunt for millions of years without evolving because they're already perfect killers. Velath waited for the shouting to die down. Yes, humans are dangerous. They breathe oxygen, which is toxic to most of us. Their gravity would crush our bones. They can survive injuries that would kill us instantly, but that's exactly why we need them. He pulled up new data on the display. Look at their military records from before the quarantine. In every conflict, humans won not through superior technology, but through unthinkable tactics. They flew ships into enemy vessels on purpose. They fought with broken bones. One human soldier held off 50 Krogan warriors with what they call a combat knife, basically a sharpened piece of metal. They're barbarians, someone protested. Yes, Velath agreed. But they're barbarians who survived on a planet that tries to kill them every day. They evolved alongside diseases that would wipe out our worlds. They have a saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. They literally believe suffering improves them. Council leader Thymus considered this. The weight of 5 trillion lives rested on her decision. She looked at the display showing the swarm's advance. Another world had just gone dark while they argued. Show me Terra's current defense status, she ordered. The display switched to images that made several representatives gasp. Earth's orbital defense platforms bristled with weapons. Massive warships patrolled the outer system. Mars had been turned into a fortress world. The humans hadn't been idle during their quarantine. They'd been preparing. They've been expecting us to call, Velath said quietly. Look at their fleet positions. They're already aimed toward the outer rim. They knew about the swarm before we told them. How? Thymus asked. Because humans have a word for everything that could kill them, which is everything. They plan for disasters we can't imagine. They have protocols for alien invasions, robot uprisings, and something called a zombie apocalypse, which I don't fully understand but sounds terrifying. The council voted. It wasn't unanimous, but it was enough. The distress signal was authorized. The message was simple. Humanity, the galaxy needs you. The quarantine is lifted. Help us. On Earth, Admiral Chen stood in the command center of the Orbital Defense Platform Alpha. She was 60 years old, had fought in 3 wars, and had been waiting for this moment since humanity learned they weren't alone in the universe. The message appeared on her screen. She read it twice, then smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator that just heard the dinner bell. All stations, this is Admiral Chen. Code Black authorized. Wake up the fleet. All of it. Across the solar system, alarms began to sound. On Mars, massive bay doors opened, revealing dreadnoughts that had been sleeping for decades. Their reactors hummed to life, each one powerful enough to crack a moon. On the moons of Jupiter, weapons platforms that violated 17 galactic treaties powered up their railguns. But Chen wasn't done. She activated a broadcast that reached every human colony, every space station, every mining rig in the system. Citizens of Terra and her colonies. The aliens who locked us in our system for 40 years now come begging for help. The Devourer swarm threatens the galaxy. They want to see what humans can do? Let's show them. The Volunteer Corps is now open. Requirements, beating hearts, and burning anger. Everything else we'll provide. The response was immediate. Within an hour, 1 million humans had signed up. Within 6 hours, it was 10 million. Miners, soldiers, engineers, even teachers and doctors. They came from Earth's megacities, from the dome colonies on Mars, from the ice mines of Europa. each one ready to show the galaxy what humanity could do when unleashed. In the council chamber, representatives watched the human response in growing horror and awe. They had expected maybe a few ships, a token force. Instead, humanity was mobilizing like the galaxy had never seen. Every ship capable of combat was being prepared. Civilian vessels were being converted to military use. Children were painting kill marks on ships that hadn't fired yet. "What have we done?" whispered the Zenith representative. Velath watched the numbers climbing on his screen. Human ships launching by the hundreds, volunteers signing up by the millions, weapons that shouldn't exist being loaded onto vessels built for war. "We've awakened the Deathworlders," he said, and they seem happy about it. The last image from Earth showed Admiral Chen addressing her fleet commanders. Behind her, an ancient Earth banner hung on the wall. It showed a coiled snake with words beneath it, "Don't tread on me." "The galaxy rejected us," Chen was saying. "Called us too violent, too dangerous, too primitive. Now they need us, so we'll save them. And then they'll never forget what humans are capable of. Ready the fleet. We have a swarm to kill." The transmission ended. In the council chamber, 500 representatives sat in silence, wondering if they had just saved the galaxy or doomed it to a different kind of destruction. Only time would tell. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of the swarm. No warning, no formation, no tactical approach. They just appeared in space like a swarm of angry wasps, 4,000 ships strong, already accelerating to attack speed. On the bridge of the Kyrathi observation vessel, Commander Veltok nearly choked on his breathing fluid. They jumped directly into combat range. That's suicide. His sensor operator's scales turned white with fear. "Sir, I'm reading their weapons. They're not using energy beams. They're firing solid objects at incredible speeds." The first human volley hit the swarm before anyone could process what was happening. Tungsten rods, accelerated to 20% the speed of light, tore through the biomechanical mass like bullets through paper. Each impact released energy equal to a nuclear bomb. The swarm's adaptation abilities, designed to absorb and redirect energy weapons, were useless against simple, brutal kinetic force. Captain Rodriguez gripped her command chair as the Hellhound shook from its own weapons fire. "Keep firing!" "Don't give them time to think." Her weapons officer, Marcus Thompson, the former ice miner, laughed as he launched another volley. "They're trying to absorb kinetic impacts. Like trying to eat a punch to the face." The swarm writhed and twisted, its collective intelligence struggling to understand this new threat. For 1 billion years it had faced energy weapons, plasma cannons, antimatter bombs. It had never encountered a species that would throw rocks at relativistic speeds, but humanity was just getting started. "Launch the boarders." Admiral Chen commanded from Earth's vengeance. Hundreds of boarding torpedoes erupted from the human ships. Each one was packed with Marines in power armor, carrying weapons that would make the Geneva Convention weep. The torpedoes punched through the swarm's outer bioships and delivered their cargo directly into the enemy's guts. Sergeant Jane Reaper Williams was first out of her torpedo. Her power armor, 2 tons of mechanized death, hit the swarm ship's internal corridors with a wet thud. The walls were alive, pulsing with alien biology trying to digest her. "Oh, you want to eat me?" she snarled, activating her flamethrower. "Let me give you some heartburn." Fire erupted from her armor. Not normal fire, but thermite-enhanced plasma that burned at 4,000 degrees. The biological walls screamed, actually screamed, and retreated from the heat. Behind her, 50 more Marines poured out, each one a walking tank armed with humanity's most terrible weapons. Private Johnson carried something called a molecular disruption device. It basically made things fall apart at the atomic level. Private Kim had a gun that fired micro-black holes. They lasted only nanoseconds, but that was enough to delete chunks of reality. "Move forward," Williams ordered. "Find something that looks important and kill it." The Marines advanced through the living ship, burning and destroying everything in their path. The swarm sent warrior forms against them, creatures designed to tear apart conventional soldiers. But humans in power armor weren't conventional anything. They punched through biological armor with mechanically enhanced fists, tore apart adaptation nodes with combat knives, and when ammunition ran low, they just used the swarm's own body parts as clubs. Outside, the space battle had become something from a nightmare. Human ships weren't fighting with any recognizable tactics. They were swarming, ramming, and sometimes just exploding on purpose. Captain Lisa Park, the chemistry teacher turned warrior, flew her converted cruise ship directly at a swarm mothership. "All crew, abandon ship in 30 seconds. I'm turning us into the galaxy's biggest pipe bomb." Her crew didn't argue. They knew the plan. They'd packed the ship's hull with fertilizer, fuel, and enough unstable chemicals to crack a small moon. As escape pods launched, Lisa aimed the ship at the swarm mothership's center mass. "For Earth," she shouted, then jumped into the last pod as her ship became a 30-megaton explosion. The swarm mothership didn't just die, it evaporated. Observer Kelleth watched from the safety of his ship, unable to process what he was seeing. They're insane. They're completely, utterly insane. But then he noticed something. The swarm was retreating. For the first time in recorded history, the all-consuming horror was backing away. "It's working," he whispered. "Their insanity is working." The Canadian contingent unveiled Project Maple Fury. It was, essentially, a gun that fired smaller guns that fired even smaller guns, creating a recursive cascade of kinetic death. When it fired, it looked like reality itself was shattering. The Russians deployed their nuclear chicken tactic. 50 ships accelerated toward swarm vessels on collision courses. The swarm, used to enemies that valued self-preservation, expected them to turn away. They didn't. The Russians played ancient Earth music, something called hard bass, at volumes that somehow transmitted through the vacuum of space, and flew straight into their targets. The explosions were visible from 3 star systems away. Meanwhile, a group of Australian volunteers had actually succeeded in their insane plan. They'd boarded a swarm command node with nothing but knives, explosives, and what they called can-do attitude. They were currently riding the dying bioship like a surfboard as it crashed into another swarm vessel. "This is better than wrestling crocodiles," one of them shouted over comms, somehow still alive despite being exposed to hard vacuum for 12 seconds. Admiral Chen watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The swarm was in full retreat, but she wasn't done. "All ships pursue and destroy. Don't let a single one escape." The human fleet surged forward, chasing the retreating swarm. Ships that ran out of ammunition started ramming. A group of American engineers had jury-rigged a stellar harvester into something they called a star shotgun. It fired superheated plasma in a spread pattern that deleted entire squadrons of swarm. Drones. Captain Rodriguez's ship had lost half its weapons and was venting atmosphere from 12 hull breaches. Her crew had sealed the holes with emergency foam and determination. Status report. Weapons at 30%. Shields are a memory. Engine 2 is on fire, but in a good way. It's giving us extra thrust, Marcus reported. Perfect. Ram that big one. Captain, that's a swarm supernode. It's 50 times our size. Then we'll make a big hole. All hands, brace for impact. The Hellhound accelerated toward the massive bioship. At the last second, Rodriguez fired every remaining weapon directly ahead, weakening the swarm's hull. The human ship punched through like a bullet, emerged from the other side covered in alien gore, then turned around to do it again. The swarm's collective intelligence was experiencing something new. Fear. These creatures didn't fight for survival. They fought for the joy of fighting. They laughed as they died. They sang while killing. They were chaos incarnate, and the swarm had no adaptation for pure, distilled insanity. In desperation, the swarm tried to communicate. It sent out psychic pulses, attempting to negotiate, to understand, to find some logic in humanity's assault. The human response was broadcast on all frequencies. It was Admiral Chen's voice, calm and cold. "You ate 3-star systems. 12 billion lives. No negotiation, no mercy. Only death." Then she switched to address her fleet. "All ships implement overkill protocol. I want this swarm so dead that its ancestors feel it." The humans had been holding back. Mining ships activated their drilling lasers at power levels that violated the laws of physics. Civilian volunteers in modified shuttles performed suicide runs with holds full of antimatter. Someone had brought a weapon called a gravity hammer that created miniature black holes on impact. The battle became a massacre. The swarm, which had consumed galaxies, which had existed since before most current civilizations evolved, was being torn apart by a species that had only achieved spaceflight 300 years ago. Private Williams, still fighting inside a swarm ship, found what looked like a central processing node. It was a massive brain-like structure, pulsing with bioelectric activity. She planted every explosive she had left, then sat down on top of them. "Hey, Swarm," she broadcast. We evolved on a planet where everything tried to kill us. We had to fight for every breath, every meal, every single day of survival. You thought you were the apex predator of the galaxy. But you've never met a species that made friends with wolves, that domesticated death itself. We are humanity. We are Deathworlders. And you knocked on the wrong fucking door. She detonated the explosives. The psychic scream of the swarm echoed across the void. It wasn't just dying. It was being systematically exterminated by a species that had turned warfare into art and destruction into joy. As the last major swarm node died, dissolved by something the humans called gray goo nanobots, the human fleet finally stopped. They floated in space, surrounded by the debris of their enemy, singing victory songs and already planning the next battle. The swarm's retreat into the void nebula should have been the end of the battle. Any sensible species would have stopped at the edge of that cosmic death trap. The nebula was a region of space where physics went insane. Radiation storms that could cook DNA in seconds. Gravity waves that tore ships apart. Sensor-blocking clouds that made navigation impossible. Admiral Chen looked at the swirling mass of purple and black gases on her display. Her officers waited for the order to hold position and plan. Instead, she smiled. All ships follow them in. Maximum speed. The alien observers couldn't believe what they were hearing. Commander Veltok frantically opened a communication channel. Admiral Chen, that's the Void Nebula. The radiation alone will kill your crews in minutes. Chen's response was casual. Commander, we evolved on a planet with background radiation, solar flares, and cosmic rays. We used to use radiation as medical treatment. We'll be fine. But the gravity waves, ever heard of surfing? It's an Earth sport where we ride massive waves for fun. This is just surfing in space. The human fleet plunged into the nebula without hesitation. What happened next would be remembered as either the greatest act of courage or the most insane military decision in galactic history. Probably both. Inside the nebula, reality became a suggestion rather than a rule. Ships twisted and warped as gravity waves hit them. Radiation turned the void into a light show of deadly colors. Navigation computers screamed errors and died. The humans turned off their computers and flew manually. This reminds me of the Jupiter storm rally, Captain Rodriguez said, wrestling with her ship's controls as a gravity wave tried to turn the Hellhound inside out. Remember to lean into the turns. Her pilot, a former street racer from Neo-Tokyo, was grinning like a madman. Captain, I can use the gravity waves to slingshot us faster. Want to try? Do it. The Hellhound caught a gravity wave and rode it like a surfboard, accelerating to speeds that should have liquefied the crew. But humans, with their redundant organs and shock-resistant biology, just gritted their teeth and held on. Other ships followed suit. Soon the entire human fleet was dancing through the nebula, using the deadly environment as a speed boost. Ships spun and twisted, riding gravitational currents that would have torn apart any other vessels. The swarm, watching its pursuers navigate the nebula with impossible ease, experienced something close to panic. It had retreated here because no other species had ever followed it into the void. The nebula was its sanctuary, its breeding ground, its fortress. The humans were treating it like a playground. Deep in the nebula's heart, sensors started working again. What the humans found there made even them pause. The swarm's origin point was a structure that defied comprehension. It was part biological, part mechanical, part something else entirely. The size of a small moon, it pulsed with malevolent life. Surrounding it were converted star systems, entire worlds that had been transformed into breeding grounds for new swarm units. My God, someone whispered over comms. It's a factory, a galaxy-eating factory. Admiral Chen studied the readings. The structure was protected by millions of swarm units, layers of defensive bioships and energy fields that bent space itself. Any conventional attack would take months and cost thousands of ships. Activate extinction protocol, she ordered. Across the fleet, sealed compartments opened. Weapons that humanity had banned under its own laws were brought online. These weren't just tools of war. They were tools of annihilation, created by a species that had once split atoms just to see what would happen. The first to launch were the relativistic kill vehicles. These were simple in concept. Small objects accelerated to 99.9% the speed of light. At that velocity, a paperclip hit with the force of a nuclear weapon. The humans were launching school bus-sized projectiles. Next came the false vacuum bombs. These weapons didn't just destroy matter. They rewrote the laws of physics in a localized area, causing reality itself to collapse. The scientists who created them had nightmares about what they'd built. But the worst was yet to come. 3 ships emerged from hyperspace. They were sleeper ships hidden in deep space for 50 years, carrying humanity's most terrible creation, the Stellar Destabilizer. Captain Rodriguez watched the weapon deploy with a mixture of awe and horror. "Are we really going to use that?" "The swarm ate 12 billion people," Admiral Chen replied. "We're going to use everything." The Stellar Destabilizer was humanity's answer to the question, what's the worst thing we could possibly build? It was a device that could cause stars to go supernova prematurely. The humans had built 3 of them, just in case. As the weapons began their work, the swarm launched everything it had. Millions of bioships swarmed toward the human fleet. The nebula became a shooting gallery of impossible scale. Human ships fired in all directions, using weapons that shouldn't exist, tactics that made no sense, and sheer bloody-minded determination. A group of Marines, led by Sergeant Williams, who had somehow survived her previous explosion, boarded the main structure. They fought through corridors that actively tried to digest them, past defense systems that rewrote biological code on contact, into the heart of the swarm's consciousness. What they found there was almost sad. The swarm's central intelligence wasn't a monster. It was a survivor, the last of its kind, which had been consuming galaxies out of a twisted form of loneliness, trying to make everything else part of itself so it would never be alone again. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard," Williams said. "Still going to kill you, though." She activated a device called a consciousness grenade. It didn't destroy the body. It destroyed the ability to think, to be aware, to exist as anything more than meat. The swarm's scream wasn't psychic this time. It was the sound of a billion-year-old consciousness dying, finally and completely. Every swarm unit in the galaxy felt it. They didn't just stop fighting, they stopped being. Without the central intelligence, they were just biological machines with no purpose, no drive, no reason to exist. But the humans weren't satisfied with victory. They wanted to make sure nothing like the swarm could ever rise again. The Stellar Destabilizer fired. In the nebula, 3 stars began to die. Not slowly, over millions of years, but immediately. They swelled, turned red, then white, then exploded with the force of supernovas. The chain reaction consumed the swarm's breeding grounds, its converted worlds, every trace of its existence. The human fleet rode the shockwave out of the nebula, surfing on the death of stars. Ships that had been held together by emergency seals and hope somehow survived the impossible journey. As they emerged into normal space, battered and broken but victorious, the alien observers were silent. The humans had done more than defeat the swarm. They had erased it from existence so thoroughly that future civilizations would think it was a myth. Captain Rodriguez's ship was down to 1 working engine, and life support was failing, but her crew was singing. It was an old Earth song about coming home from war, about surviving the impossible. "Status report," she asked. Marcus, still at his weapon station despite a broken arm and radiation burns, grinned. "Ship's fucked. Crew's half dead. We surfed a supernova. Best day ever." Admiral Chen surveyed the fleet. They'd lost 800 ships. 3,000 more were severely damaged. By any measure, it should have been a disaster. But humans measured victory differently. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. The swarm is dead. Not defeated, not retreating, but dead. We went into hell itself and burned it down. The galaxy thought we were monsters. They were right, but we're their monsters now." The message was broadcast to the entire galaxy. The quarantined species had just saved everyone by being exactly what they were, Deathworlders who had evolved to find joy in the impossible, to laugh at death and to turn warfare into something between art and madness. As the fleet limped toward home, medical ships from the Galactic Council approached, offering aid. The humans accepted, but the alien medics were shocked by what they found. Humans with radiation doses that should have killed them were playing cards. Soldiers with broken bones were having drinking contests. One engineer had sealed a hull breach with his own uniform and duct tape and was asking when the next battle would be. The galaxy had called for help. Humanity had answered by showing them what a species raised by death itself could do when properly motivated. The swarm was gone, but the memory of humanity's response would last forever. The council chamber was silent as the human fleet emerged from hyperspace above the capital world. 3,000 ships, many held together by little more than hull patches and determination, descended through the atmosphere. They looked like they'd been through hell because they had. They'd chased death itself into the void and beaten it to death with its own arms. Council leader Thymus stood at the viewing platform, watching Earth's vengeance land at the spaceport. The massive dreadnought was missing half its armor, had burn marks covering its hull, and one of its main guns had been replaced with what appeared to be a swarm bioweapon welded on backwards. Somehow it was still flying. Admiral Chen walked down the ramp, her uniform torn and burned, her face bearing new scars, but her back straight and her eyes sharp. Behind her came humanity's warriors, Marines whose power armor was held together with tape, pilots who'd flown through supernovas, engineers who'd turned farming equipment into weapons of mass destruction. They looked like exactly what they were, the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Admiral Chen, Thymus said, her crystalline form shimmering with emotion, the Galactic Council owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid. You saved us all. Chen looked at the assembled representatives of 500 worlds, species that had locked humanity away for 40 years, species that had called them too violent, too primitive, too dangerous. She could have been angry. She could have demanded payment or power. Instead, she laughed. We didn't do it for you, Chen said. We did it because we were bored. 40 years of peace nearly drove us insane. Do you know what humans do when we have no enemies to fight? We fight ourselves. We invent problems just to solve them. We create challenges just to overcome them. That distress signal wasn't a cry for help to us. It was an invitation to the best party the galaxy has ever thrown. Ambassador Velath stepped forward, his forearms spread in a gesture of gratitude. Regardless of your motivations, humanity has proven itself. The quarantine is lifted. Earth is offered full membership in the Galactic Council, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. The formal ceremony that followed was broadcast to every inhabited world. The treaty was signed, the quarantine officially ended, and humanity was welcomed into the galactic community. But everyone watching knew the truth. Humanity wasn't joining the galaxy as an equal partner. They were joining as its protectors, its sword and shield, its monsters kept on a very loose leash. The weeks that followed were a cultural shock for everyone. Human colonies began spreading immediately, not slowly and carefully like other species, but in an explosive expansion that seemed impossible. Humans colonized worlds other species had marked as uninhabitable. A planet with crushing gravity. Humans called it good exercise. A moon with toxic atmosphere. Humans set up a mining colony and used the poison as fuel. A system with irregular solar flares. Humans set up a resort and charged admission to watch the light shows. Schools across the galaxy began teaching about the death world. Saviors. Children learned how humans had evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill them, and instead of dying, they had made friends with the predators, conquered the diseases, and turned natural disasters into tourist attractions. The story that spread fastest was about Sergeant Williams, who had detonated herself to kill a swarm node only to survive because, as she put it, I've had worse hangovers. She was giving lectures at military academies, teaching alien soldiers human tactics. Most of her lessons boiled down to, when in doubt, use more explosives. Captain Rodriguez retired from military service and opened a shipping company. Her motto was, we deliver anywhere, including active war zones. Her first contract was delivering medical supplies to a world experiencing a civil war. She flew through the combat zone while broadcasting human music at volumes that somehow penetrated vacuum, causing both sides to stop fighting just to figure out what was happening. But not everything was peaceful. 3 months after the swarm's defeat, the Zenith Empire, emboldened by the chaos, attacked several frontier worlds. They thought the humans would be too exhausted from fighting the swarm to respond. They were wrong. The human response was swift and decisive, but instead of sending the military, they sent volunteers. Specifically, they sent the ones who'd been turned away from fighting the swarm for being too enthusiastic. The Zenith Empire surrendered after 3 days. They didn't just surrender the conquered worlds. They surrendered completely, begging the humans to call off what they described as civilians who think war crimes are suggestions. Admiral Chen, now serving as humanity's representative to the Council, addressed the galaxy. Let me be clear. Humanity wants peace. We want to explore, to trade, to share knowledge. But if anyone threatens that peace, if anyone attacks the innocent, if anyone thinks they can be the next swarm, we will respond. And next time we won't hold back. A representative from a minor world raised a tentacle nervously. You were holding back? We didn't use the planet crackers, Chen said casually. Or the sun snuffers. Or Project Ragnarok, which I'm not allowed to describe, but trust me, you don't want to know. We fought the swarm with our regular weapons and volunteers. Imagine what we could do if we actually got serious. The message was clear. Humanity was the galaxy's protector now, but also its biggest threat. They were the monsters under the bed that kept the other monsters away. 6 months later, a new distress signal arrived from beyond the galactic edge. An unknown threat, something called the Void Hunters, sending probing attacks against frontier colonies. The Council debated for hours about how to respond, what forces to send, what strategies to employ. Humanity's response arrived in minutes. We're already on our way. We'll bring bigger guns this time. The Council hadn't even finished voting before the human fleet was mobilizing. Veterans were coming out of retirement. New volunteers were lining up. Engineers were building weapons that violated several laws of physics. Someone had started a betting pool on who could kill a Void Hunter with the most ridiculous improvised weapon. Don't they ever rest? Veleth asked, watching the human mobilization with awe. Thymus, who had been studying human history, shook her head. They evolved in constant conflict. Peace makes them restless. War makes them feel alive. We didn't unleash them on the galaxy. We gave them purpose. And God's help us, they're grateful for it. The human fleet departed 3 days later, 4,000 ships, freshly repaired and upgraded with salvaged swarm technology that had been repurposed in ways that made engineers weep. They were singing again. Those same war songs that had echoed through the void as they'd fought the swarm. A young human child on Earth watched the fleet leave and turned to her mother. When I grow up, I want to be a warrior like Admiral Chen, her mother smiled. Study hard. Train harder. And remember, we don't fight because we hate what's in front of us. We fight because we love what's behind us and because it's fun, the child added. Her mother laughed. And because it's fun. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. When facing extinction, when all hope seems lost, when the monsters are at the door, there's only one call to make. Call the humans. Call the Deathworlders. Call the species that looked at a universe full of things trying to kill them and decided to kill them right back. The quarantine had been lifted, but in truth, it had never been a prison. It had been a cocoon, and what emerged was exactly what the galaxy needed. Protectors who were scarier than any threat they might face. In the council chambers, a new statue was erected. It showed a human warrior, scarred and smiling, standing over the corpse of a swarm unit. The inscription read, Humanity, the galaxy's monsters, the galaxy's heroes, the galaxy's hope. Admiral Chen looked at it during her next visit and laughed. You got one thing wrong, she told Thymus. What's that? We're not your monsters or your heroes. We're just humans, and that should terrify you more than anything else in the universe. The galaxy's new age had begun, an age where humanity stood guard, weapons ready, eagerly waiting for the next threat to appear. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Because after millions of years of evolution on a world that tried to kill them every day, they'd finally found their purpose, to be the most dangerous thing in the universe, and to use that danger to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The Deathworlders were home, and the galaxy would never be the same.